Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Words of Life podcast and our weekly Bible study with Kevin Bruni and myself. So happy that you're back with us. And hello again, Kevin. It's been a little bit.
Yeah, Adam, good to see you again.
You too, my friend. How was your time off and your little vacation?
It was good. We went up with the family to Idaho to go see a foster baby we had in the past. He turned a year old.
That's awesome.
So that was fun to do. Our son was back from college for spring break, and so we got the whole family to go, and it was a nice time. So yeah, good weather the whole way, and
cool. Yeah, I saw some snowy pictures. You got some snow, and you experienced all kinds of weather, didn't you?
Oh yeah, coming up from Arizona through Nevada into Utah and then into Idaho. You know, you pass through several different climates there for sure. And so there was snow on the ground, fortunately, and it was chilly, but no snow or stormy weather at all getting there. A little bit of rain coming back, but yeah, it was a good drive for the most part, cool. Weather-wise for sure. Could have been worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is drop dead gorgeous out here in East Tennessee. Spring. Apparently, we're experiencing. This is our first, spring, transition, right? But apparently, there's multi phases of spring out here. There's such an abundance of different types of trees and they all bloom at different times.
Yeah.
Like the hardwoods, all the walnuts and the oaks and all those hardwood trees still are bare of
right.
leaves.
There's maybe buds, but that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're starting to bud a little bit, but there's no real greenery on them. But we have all the redbud trees and the dogwood trees that are like brilliant pinks and these vibrant colors. And this first started with this much hated tree. It's some sort of a pear. It's a variety of pear tree that are weak rooted and not they're not native to the area, and they fall over easily and they stink. Like the blossoms, they don't smell good at all, and so nobody likes these white trees that they actually bud first. So. Like, oh, here come those dreaded pear trees, and they don't produce any pear fruit. So, but anyway,
there's some sort of biblical story about that, isn't there? About trees not producing fruit.
I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a long descendant of that tree that Jesus cursed. Who knows?
Could be, yeah.
Very cool. Well, listen, it's been a great study so far in the book of Esther. And just kind of as a recap, last week's episode, we got all the way through chapter 4, and I'll go ahead and get up the text here. That's chapter 6. Let's back up a little bit. So the end of chapter 4, we have Mordecai meeting with Queen Esther, and he basically, tells her of this plot that Haman had pushed on the king. He signed this decree that on such and such a date, the Jews would be able to be wiped out because he proclaimed them to be an unsavory, unlawful people within the kingdom, doing the kingdom harm. And the king believed him because Haman had risen to be his kind of a right-hand man. And all of the Jews were in, mass distress. Many of them sackcloth and ashes, just weeping and sorrowful because their death sentence had been written by the king. And it was in the future. It wasn't just happening to them immediately, which was a blessing because Mordecai believes that it is fixable. So go ahead and fill in the blanks for us as we transition into there.
Yeah, so he tells her, "Hey, you got to go before the king, and you've got to beg for your people. Basically, you won't escape if you don't do this. Right? You're gonna get destroyed, and God will deliver us from somewhere else, or deliverance will come from somewhere else." He says, but she says, "Okay, everyone go and pray for 3 days and fast for 3 days, and I will do the same, and then I'll go into the king. And if I die, I die." Right? She had told him that you can't just go to the king unless you've been summoned. He has the ability to execute you if he's not pleased to see you, and I haven't been invited for months. So that's sort of how it ended off, right? That everyone, all of her attendants and people she has influence with, are going to do this. Mordecai is going to get all the Jews in Susa, the city there, to do it as well. And then that's kind of where we leave, right? The 3 days are up. And so in chapter 5, we roll right into, and then what happens, right? On the third day, what goes down. So we're going to see in this part kind of the beginning of the payoff.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So just a quick read here, just these few verses that are on the screen for chapter 5. It says that on the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace in front of the king's quarters, where the king was sitting on his royal throne inside the throne room opposite the entrance to the palace. And when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won favor in his sight, and he held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter, and the king said to her, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given you even to half of my kingdom." So just in these few verses, there's a ton of stuff to unpack and discuss. First thing that kind of stands out to my mind is that it's been 3 days of fasting and praying and meditating. And what does she do to prepare herself to enter the king's presence? She doesn't just show up, in sackcloth and ashes like the rest of the Jews, right? She puts on her royal robes. And you know that she's completely decked out to the nines. It's not just her royal robes. She got completely done up to be the most appealing, attractive, version of herself that has so far always impressed the king,
right,
and always won his favor. So she's stacking the deck in her favor, and yet she still has no guarantee that she's going to live throughout the day, or at least at the bare minimum have a future, right? She could just be banished to the Isle of Perpetual Tickling, and if you remember from a couple episodes ago, that's a VeggieTales reference. Yeah. So yeah, it's a beautiful scene. She's preparing herself, and what lessons do we have for just in that thing right there?
Yeah, right. So I mean, there's clearly a thing of she's done this work ahead of time, right? Of praying and fasting, but she's going to do everything she can as well to make the appropriate preparations, right? It reminds me a little bit of the parable of the wise and the foolish virgins, right? Now that's about being prepared for the kingdom and the coming of Jesus. But even in that parable, the story is the wise ones made preparation, right? They were prepared for the coming. And she's doing the same thing here. We had chatted a little bit offline about the Proverbs, right? And over again, the Proverbs, it's this idea of what is wisdom? What does that look like? And it's tied up there a lot of times with righteousness, but there's certainly things that are just about being wise. And in this case, what does wisdom tell you if you're going to go see the king, right? You do everything you can to gain the king's favor. And in this case, right, she knows what's going to gain the king's favor, so she's going to do what she can to get the best outcome for herself. It's not biblical, let's say, resonant in the Bible, but there's this proverb we have in our modern day of, God helps those who help themselves, right? And she's kind of doing a little bit of that here, right? I'm going to do everything I can because I don't know in what way God is going to work through me. That's her hope, right? That's why the fasting had been going on. But she's going to do everything she can to give God opportunity to work through her. And part of that is getting the king to be pleasantly disposed to her so she can at least open her mouth, right? She's got to get a chance. She's got to get in front of him first. And so she does that. And, when she even goes in, right, she brings in this attitude of humility. It says that she's outside in the courtyard, just where he can see her, right? So she's coming to the courtyard where she's not really supposed to be per se, but she doesn't just march right in there, right? She comes in a spirit of humility. He looks and sees her. He then invites her in, right? And then she goes before the throne. So she really knows either how to work this king, or she knows how to behave in front of rulers and authority in general, right? Which again, she's Jewish. If she's read her Proverbs of Solomon, there's a lot there about how you behave in front of the king and in front of the ruler, right? Yep. And she appears to be well versed in those things, just based on her sort of attitude and her approach.
Yep, absolutely. And I just not to drag this out too much, but there are some other principles involved just for some correlations to modern day life. For instance, if we are ever called to court and we are on trial for any reason, whether it's you want to appeal a traffic ticket, or whether or not you were accused of doing something wrong, whether or not you did it or not, right? If you're showing up to court in front of a judge, what are you going to dress like?
Yeah.
How are you going to present yourself in front of this judge? Are you going to do it out of respect for who the person is sitting in that judgment seat and respect for the laws that they represent? Or are you just going to go in there willy-nilly and flaunt yourself and have an attitude, or all these things? You see all these like court shows on Judge Judy and whatever, right? And all these idiots that just show up in their street clothes and like having an attitude. They're like, you're never going to get anywhere with that. The people who show up with respectful attitudes and respectful attire are going to go way more than the other. So
yeah, we get some experience with this. I was just thinking about this. We're in court all the time now, actually, virtually anyway, because of the pandemic and everything's done virtually. But we have foster children, and so we'll be in court cases. We show up to court hearings all the time, right? Several times for a child in our care over the course of their stay. And you get to see this interplay. And again, you're looking through little windows like we are now on your screen. But even through that, you can get a sense of who people are. When people show up late, when parents are sometimes on and they're like in a grocery store, maybe like this wasn't important enough for you to stop what you're doing and get someplace, right?
Yeah.
And so, you get a vibe on people and, right or wrong or otherwise. And certainly the judges and everyone involved is taking that into account as well, right? And so, yeah, you see this play out all the time. And not even just in court cases, right? If you're going to go for an interview, for a job, I mean, what are you going to do, right? How are you going to show up? You make preparation. It's just about being wise and smart in the ways of the world, right? As Jesus says, you should be wise as serpents and harmless as doves, right? And so this is just good wisdom on our part of how to behave in front of power, right?
Yep. Well, and I honestly, these same principles have been taught to me my whole life in terms of like when we go to gather together with our brethren at a worship service, a formal worship service, should there be any care and consideration to what we wear outside of just modesty? We know there's a commandment of us portraying ourselves in modest apparel and not wearing like super flashy clothes like gold adornment and things like that. So there's a moderation there, but is there any principle that we can apply to ourselves and in just terms of our own self, how we present ourselves, and does that matter? As time has progressed, and I've really seen a real casualization, a decline in the traditional like Sunday go to meeting clothes, right? So on one hand, I'm like, I totally appreciate the fact that we should be warm and accepting and approachable to the people of the world. But shouldn't we also maybe put a little effort into considering who we're going to worship?
Yeah, that's an interesting sort of question, right? And you're right. There's, when I look at in the New Testament anyway, what's most talked about, it's more on the extreme end of don't overdo it, right?
Yeah.
Is certainly is the way the New Testament reads there. So certainly I think that's the most important thing we should be aware of.
I mean, like as a performer,
right,
I have all kinds of flashy,
sure,
super high end, like nice clothes. Like I've got tuxedos and I got flashy things. I've got shiny shoes. I mean, I can show up like that,
right.
But that would be way inappropriate.
That's right. And I think that's sort of the key
as inappropriate as coming in like, a tank top and, short shorts and things like that. It would be distracting and slightly immodest, right?
And I think maybe the key thing there is, right, the real thing to be aware of is if I'm going to make an application that is probably the safest is when I come before the king, right? When I come before the king, what am I wearing? What I ought to be wearing is I ought to be wearing Jesus, right? I ought to be wearing a certain spirit and a certain attitude, as much as and more importantly than what I'm physically showing up in. And so certainly, I mean, I could be dressed in a certain way that looks very presentable to the outside world and very traditional or what we might deem as appropriate. Yet if I come with a spirit of flippancy or an attitude of casualness or any of those kinds of things, then that's even my bigger concern, right? Is what's my heart wearing?
Absolutely. And if you want, for our audience's sake, if you didn't catch our Colossians study, we actually spent a decent amount of time talking about this great revelation.
What do you put on?
What do we put on? And we may circle back to that idea, on a future episode. But there's a real correlation between what Paul says in Colossians about what we're supposed to be putting on when we come together as a body, versus the whole armor of God we find in the book of Ephesians. So, anyway, so I think we've beaten that a little bit.
Good food for thought. Yep,
it is good. It is good food, good food for thought, and I think it's appropriate to just kind of throw it out there that we really should. I think we should take consideration about what we put on, but it is more about our attitude, and I totally appreciate that. So. All right, back to Queen Esther. So there she is standing in court. She wins favor of the king. He holds out the golden scepter. She comes forward and touches it. Just the tip of the scepter, right? So she's, an arm length plus away from the king, right? Not too close. And then he offers her up to half of his kingdom.
Yeah, we'll see this several times, right? We'll see this if we keep even thinking about the next verses, right? You don't have to necessarily read through them, but in the next couple of verses, he'll repeat this, right? This big claim, which sort of shows his something about his character or his nature, I think. I mean, he was quite given to extravagant proclamations in the early part of the book as well, right? When you bring her in here, and then she does it, and then he's enraged, and what should we do? Oh, banish her. Never let her be seen again, right? Let's find a better woman than her, right? Yes, do that. And then he comes to his senses later and goes, oh, man, I really
kind of miss her.
Yeah. So he's given to sort of these, speaking before thinking maybe moments, or these quite extreme kind of statements.
Well, it's egotistical bravado.
Really, right. It kind of tells you about his place in the world even, right? And where he sits in relative power and status, right? That, I can just give things at a whim.
I can give half of my kingdom away. It's fine.
Right.
No big deal.
Yeah. And so then, he does that, and her response then is fantastic, right? So he's offered half the kingdom, and her response here in 4 is, hey, just come to a feast that I've prepared, you and Haman both, right? That's what I want. I have a blank check, and all I really want is the honor of your presence, right? At a lunch I made for you. And so again, she's working this guy really, really well here. And that's interesting, right? Because she could have said what she really wanted, which is, my people are about to be destroyed. You half the kingdom, great. All I'm asking for you is to spare these people. But instead, right, she says, come to this. I want my desire. The reason I've risked death effectively is so that I can honor you. That's got to make him feel good, right? And win him over a little bit. And then she sort of introduces the Haman angle here, right? He's apparently not present at this time.
He's close. He's nearby.
But he's not quite present, because they will say here, in verse 5, go bring him quickly so we can do as he's asked, right? So go get Haman and let's go have lunch or whatever. And so, that's what she does. But please the king, come to this banquet, and I want to honor you and Haman, right? And so they do. They go. They show up, and here it is again, right? In verse 6, as he's drinking his wine. What is your wish, right? He knows this isn't the real ask. The real ask is not just, I wanted to make you lunch. Okay, tell me now, right? We've wined and dined. What's your real wish? And again, even up to half the kingdom, it's yours. Just name it, all right? And again, her request is, come tomorrow, right? And then I'll do as you've said, right?
Let's do this again.
Let's do this really again. Fun. Yeah, and then I will get you my real request and what I'm really asking for. But I really want you to understand how much I want to honor you and Haman here. And so we had talked about, is this just her wisdom coming through again? Is this something that she's I mean, I don't think she's thinking up on the spot, right? So she's concocted it, or she has somehow maybe been given an answer to her fasting and prayer of this is the route to go. She's come up with quite an elaborate step-by-step way before she just makes her ask, right? Which is different. I mean, we see things like in Nehemiah where, you know, he'll hear about how the walls are not repaired and he's before the king, same empire, and he's before the king, and, you know, he says, "Oh, your face has fallen. What's wrong?" And he says a quick little prayer and says, "I want to go fix the walls." Right.
Yeah.
He doesn't say, "Come to a banquet and come to another banquet and come to," right. And that works out just fine for him.
Yep.
You know, but somehow this is the course of action she's deemed as wise, and, you know, spoiler alert, it works out for her. So clearly, you know, what she's doing here is the way to go. Would it have worked otherwise? Maybe, we'll never know. But this is what she does, right?
Well, you know, it does make you wonder a little bit, like, how often do we just go for the quick and easy answer, or go for the most obvious thing? Sometimes laying a little more groundwork and preparing the subject of your, you know, request, to preparing them emotionally, like really setting them up and setting yourself up for more success.
Yeah.
You know, there's definitely some wisdom there, I think, you know, that we can just pause a little bit. Is there a better way to do this? It might take more time, but will the results be better?
Yeah. And I think we had talked about as well, sort of offline, this idea of, you know, we don't know who's in the throne room. It's unlikely that the king just sitting on the throne by himself, right, in an empty hall. Haman is not there, but there are likely other, you know, courtiers and supplicants, etc., that are there in the room. And she could just call out Haman. You know, this guy Haman, he's tricked you. He wants to destroy me and all my people. The Jews have done nothing wrong, right? Let's go kill him right now. But instead, she basically says, let's take this to a private place. Let me take this and not publicly sort of pull this up and shame him. She doesn't know who Haman has as supporters, perhaps on the court, etc. And that's very different than the way we do things often today.
In a real sense, though, you know, since the king had elevated Haman, if she had called him out publicly, wouldn't it have also, like, left a residual negative effect on the king?
And we know the king has said things before in front of a large group of people that then he kind of has to follow through on a little bit, right? You know, he called out the previous Queen Vashti. She didn't do it in front of all these people. Now, she showed him up in front of the king, right? And so a similar thing may be going on here, that, hey, I know the king. Let's get him somewhere where his pride won't be wounded. But it's a sort of a wise course of action, and it's against the way we do things today, right? People oftentimes are just, I'm going to go into a Twitter beef, or I guess it's X now, whatever, right? And just throw it out to the whole world and let's argue it out in the public sphere. And, you know, we know this is not the way to go, even in the New Testament church, right? You've got a problem with your brother, you go take it in privately. That's the first course of action. And then, right, if you won't do that, get a couple witnesses, etc. So there's a way we go about things in the kingdom. There's a way that apparently is the way God wants us to work those things out. And while that's not what's going on here per se, the same principle seems to apply, that she's kind of, I'm going to take this up privately. There's a guy here, and here's what's going on, right? And that's what ends up working out for her in the end. So certainly it seems to be wise.
For sure. All right, so let's get into the attitude and the character of Haman. So here we are. Haman he's the most puffed up peacock in the court right now. And he goes home and he's just, oh, look at me. I got invited to a private feast with the queen and the king.
That's right, just me.
I'm the only one that got invited. And guess what? I got invited to tomorrow's feast. Just me again.
Right.
How amazing am I?
And he's got to certainly be thinking, right? Like, why does she want me there all the time, right? Well, she wants me. She must see me as valuable and important. Maybe there's some big important thing. Maybe she wants to elevate me. Maybe she's going to tell the king how great I am, whatever. But or maybe she just sees me as sort of equal to the king, right? Let me feast you and Haman, right? I mean, you guys are, you know, so it's elevating his status.
I love verse 11. Haman recounted to them the splendor
Yeah.
of his riches, the number of his sons, all the promotions with which the king had honored him, and how he had advanced him above all the officials and servants of the king,
Yeah.
even Queen Esther, right?
Yeah. Let no one come but me, right?
Right?
I'm invited
Yeah.
in tomorrow. And then 13, right? Which we saw there's a hint there in 9, right? As he's so excited, he all he does is he sees
Yeah.
Mordecai, and it just ruins his whole mood.
And so he's got this super high, and then the pendulum swings back. He sees Mordecai and he goes, "Roar!"
Yeah. And his statement in 13 is quite interesting. None of these things mean anything to me. It's worthless as long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate, right? Just that everything I have in this entire world is worth nothing because as long as that guy's alive. And again, what's the reason? Because he doesn't bow down to me, right? That's it. He hasn't done anything. He just doesn't bow down to me out in front. He makes me look bad. He's the only person who doesn't honor me. So I have all the honor from everyone else, but this one guy won't honor me. It's all rubbish, right? I count it all loss for the sake of Mordecai. Which is just I don't even know what the right words are there to describe the level of egotism and just complete maladjusted worldview it takes to make my entire life is ruined by this one guy's existence on the planet.
It's definitely melodramatic to the nth degree. I mean,
yes, I believe they would say today that he, Mordecai is living rent free in Haman's head, right? That he's just, he's just there all the time. Just, right.
Yeah.
And that's the case here.
So then, of course, he's got his whole family on board with how good he is. So his wife, in 14, his wife Zeresh, and all his friends said to him, "Oh, you need to build a 50 cubit high gallows."
Yeah.
And then have Mordecai hanged upon it, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, and we were talking offline, 50 cubits, it's approximately 75 feet tall.
Yeah.
It's way overkill. B, it would be like the most monumental hanging ever in the history. Well, of course, a man like Haman should only hang people on gallows that are 50 cubits high, right?
Yeah.
And then after Mordecai is hanged, you can go joyfully.
Then you'll be happy to go to the feast.
Then you'll be happy. So, of course, that pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made. Apparently overnight.
Yeah, he could get some. That's his plan anyway, right? To get these gallows built today, or this evening and into tomorrow. Whenever I go to the feast tomorrow night,
right?
You got a day or 12 hours to get these things built up here, so I can hang him because he wants to hang him before he goes. It's the plan anyway. Now it doesn't look like it works out that way, but that's his rough plan was to hang him before he goes to the feast. And that idea there again about. You and I have been saying several times as we've talked, we just finished a study in the Proverbs, and you're doing one, I know, at the teen class there in the Proverbs, right? But just this idea of the importance of wise counsel, right, is something you'll see in the Proverbs. It's through counsel that things are established. It's through wise counsel that you'll be wise. Listen to counsel and accept discipline, and you'll be wise all of your days.
Don't listen to fools.
Over and over again, right? You see this idea expressed. And so what does he do? He hears counsel from these people, right? And their counsel is, hey, kill a man, right? And then you'll be happy. And he goes, yeah, it sounds like a good plan. I'm going to do that, right? That's a good plan. He hasn't killed him yet on his own, right? Like, you notice that in the story, he hasn't decided I can take care of this by killing this guy. It's a thorn in his side. So there's some reason that he knows I shouldn't kill this guy on his own. He knows that, right? Otherwise he would have done it. But he hears this counsel from his wife and his friends, and he goes, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I don't know why I didn't think of that. And so now he's going to go through with it, right? Now he's going to kill this guy.
So Haman plots this plan to destroy Mordecai. Meanwhile, back in the Batcave, chapter 6 happens. This is the chapter of awesome irony.
Yep.
All right. So here we are, middle of the night. For whatever reason, the king can't sleep. He's got a little insomnia. Maybe he's just really, really super excited with Queen Esther, and
too much got all that.
Like, oh man, she loves me so much.
Tomorrow.
She's honoring me. I can't wait for the whatever, right?
It's like the first day before school, right? I just can't even sleep. I'm so excited, right? Whatever's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, and so there he is, not sleeping, and so he calls in one of his people, to bring in the book of memorable deeds, the Chronicles. So they had, people, scribes dictating all the events that are happening around the king and the country. And so they started reading these things to the king. And lo and behold, Mordecai, how he told Esther about the plot to kill the king, was recorded for him to remember. So so this big, it tells the story again. And Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, they were gonna kill the king, and so he says, "Well, hey, what did we do for Mordecai for this?
What did we do with that guy?
Like, hey, that guy needs a reward,
Right?
right?" And take it from there, Kev.
Yeah, right. Go back to the end of chapter 2 is where we see that story originally, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what did we do? What did we do for this guy? And the guy goes, "Oh, it looks like nothing. I mean, we didn't record anything down in the account book here that Mordecai was honored in any way." So, and so the king, right? He sees this is a problem. Let's remedy this. Let's fix this, right? And so he just wants to know who's around in the court, right? Give me some advisors. Again, sort of this advice and counsel thing goes up again and again in Esther. And the person who's in the courtyard there, who's around at this time of night, is Haman, right? Haman's there. Now he's there because, and then this maybe ties into why he hasn't killed Mordecai so far. He's there to ask the king's permission, basically, to hang a guy, right? Hey, I've got these gallows on my belt. There's this guy I want to kill. I need your okay. I need your sign off to execute somebody. So if you don't like somebody, you got to get the king's permission at least to get them executed. So he's there to go ask about, hey, can I kill this guy? He dishonors me, I'm sure, right? And they say, hey, Haman's outside, and so he goes, oh, that great, bring him in, right? Bring him in. I want to ask his opinion, his advice on this. And so this idea, again, this hubris of Haman is incredible. In verse 6 there, the king asks him, what should be done to the man whom the king delights to honor? That's the question, right? What should be done to him? And Haman's thought is, well, who would the king delight to honor more than me, right? He doesn't say this. He just thinks it in his head.
He says to himself, right? Hey,
hey, well, I'm
obviously he's talking
the only person
me.
he wants to honor is me, right? He's asking me. And so he says, well, here's what I would like, right? And so he comes up with the greatest thing he can think of on the spot, right? Is put on the royal robe, right? The one you wear, to your horse that you've ridden, right? The royal horse, put the crown on his head, just let's parade him through the streets of the city, right? Like you would be. And let's parade him, and someone will go before him and say, this will be done for the man the king delights to honor, right? Like if you do good things for the king, this is what the king will do for you, right? And you just have a parade effectively in your honor where you're dressed up like the king. That would be it. That'd be cool, right? Yeah. So this is what Haman thinks is the best reward ever that he could come up with on the spot.
And the best punchline in the Bible.
Yeah, right. There it is. Verse 10.
The king said to Haman, hurry, take the robes and the horse, just as you said, and go do it for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate.
Don't leave out anything.
Don't leave
out any part, right? Like make sure you do it, and that's what's great about it. You do it. Don't leave out. You've got to go before him, and you've got to proclaim about Mordecai back here on the horse, right? You're going to lead the horse. You're going to proclaim very loud to everyone. Thus shall it be done for the man the king delights to honor, right? So this is just the great turnabout here of the probably the whole book.
Absolutely. Maybe
so
the whole Bible. It's one of the most just I gotcha moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he has to go do this now, right? Which I mean is just in the sense of the story, and again, if you think of this as like a play or a novella, right?
Yeah.
You can see this being acted out on stage. You can just sort of get the reaction of Haman here, what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like. If you're thinking of it as a play in the audience watching, right, they just get the kind of reaction there to this going to happen. And then you imagine playing out.
Honestly, I do picture this happening this way, and I see Haman begrudgingly leading this horse, saying, "Thus it shall be done to the man who the king delights to honor."
Yeah.
Right. I mean, head down and not really proclaiming it very loudly, but man, it's really funny.
Yeah. And certainly, right, he has just said a minute ago that everything in my life is basically worthless, right? All these great things I have is basically worthless because this guy just lives. And now he's got to go honor this guy. So now it's not just that he gets to be alive, right?
Right.
Now I have to go around and honor this man in front of me.
Yep.
And so, I mean, he does it. He goes, he does this thing.
Of course he does. The king
He has
commanded
to.
him.
He has no other option.
He had no other option, right?
Yep. And as soon as he goes, you can see there, right? Mordecai returns to the king's gate, and Haman hurries to us, mourning with his head covered, right? So he's basically as though someone has died, right? He's
right.
grieving,
yeah.
And he's told everything, right? That his friends and his wife again, right? This is all these terrible things that have happened to me. And then there's this interesting statement here, right, from his family, which is quite curious, because they say, in there, if Mordecai before you have begun to fall is of the Jewish people, you will not overcome him, but you will surely fall before him. And so that's interesting. That it tells me that the people that he's talked to, Zeresh and his friends, he must not have told them that he was Jewish. Right? Because it's almost like they figure out, oh, wait, this guy's a Jew? Oh, you don't want to mess with him, right? Which
clearly the hand of God is working.
Yeah. And so if they had known that before, they probably wouldn't have said, make a giant gallows to hang him on, right? Because now they're like, oh, wait, if he's a Jew, you're not going to succeed against him, right? And so that's interesting for.
Wait, did you say Mordecai the Jew?
Mordecai the Jew? Oh, I thought it was different Mordecai, right?
Whoa! You should have told us that before.
Yeah, that might have changed our advice. And again, we don't get any mention of it, but the only reasonable explanation here is that they're saying you don't mess with the Jews, right? Because they have this God that backs them up. And that's interesting too, because the Jews have this time been released, right, from the captivity and things like that. But there's certainly been times where the Jews have been overcome. I mean, they've been a captive people, right? But they also understand something about. I think what they see there is that not only is he Jewish, but he's Jewish, and you've begun to fall before him, right? Which somehow suggests in their mind, look, there's all the Jews, but there's certain Jews that God really looks out for, and you don't want to get on the wrong side of those ones, right? And it looks like this might be one of those ones, right? And so you better be careful, right? And it's almost like prophetic. It's too late for you. What's happened here. And so maybe they've heard stories of Jewish history of the past, right? The way they came out of Egypt and all of those things that get recounted over and over again in the Old Testament. Their victories and these things of David, and how he escapes miraculous things and strikes down mighty people bigger than he is, and all these sorts of things, right? But they've got some sort of thing of like, we know there's certain things that sometimes get a little sketchy here, so you better be careful.
Yeah.
And it's just great the way that sort of plays out, and you get this insight into what at least people were thinking of the Jews at the time. Mm-hmm. And it's a warning for us, right? If we had kind of talked about a little, this section reminds me of Jesus' statement to his disciples there in Luke, where he's talking about, hey, when you go to a feast, right? When you're called into a feast, when you're called into someone's house for dinner, don't go take the best seats, right? Don't go claim the chief places, lest someone more honorable than you come and the master says, hey, you scoot over and let him take the best place. Instead, you should sit down at the end of the table and let him say, oh, no, you come up here, and let him honor you, right? And Haman has clearly not done this in this circumstance. He went into the king, and the king said, what should be done for the man to honor? And he said, I'm going to take the chief spot. I'm going to assume in my mind I'm the chief spot, all these great things. And then he goes, great, there's someone more honorable than you. You scoot down and put Mordecai up here, and you now go lead him around, right? And so he's, that Jesus teaching didn't exist at the time, right? At least not as Jesus had said it, but he doesn't follow that wise principle there. You can almost picture Jesus when he's saying, remember how Haman was, right? Here's a good example of when this played out.
Yeah.
And that's what we see here. He's been moved aside for Mordecai, right? And they see that, oh, you've begun to fall. Mordecai has moved in front of you now. You had to just lead him through the streets. Doesn't look good for you, right? And so that's kind of a reminder maybe of how we ought to be careful. Again, how you're careful before the king, how you're careful before authority, and certainly how you wear humility over pride is a good example here.
And so he actually, Haman, almost feel sorry for him. Right? Like, here he is, high and mighty. Definitely takes a big fall when the king tells him to go do to Mordecai what he had proclaimed.
Plan for himself, yeah.
Then he goes home where yesterday he had all the support in the
All
world.
the support in the world, yep.
And now they're like, well,
things don't look so good for you.
Things aren't looking so good for you, you know?
Yeah.
You will surely fall before him.
Yeah. And the chapter ends here as we're kind of run out of time, right? But the chapter ends here with this, again, this sort of this setup, right? Or this
while they were still talking with him.
Yeah. It's like you can see this idea of while they're talking, the king's eunuchs arrive and they hurry him to the banquet and scene, right? And you can see the scene. That's the end of Act 2, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so now that he's going to go off to the feast, and it goes dark and the curtain falls, right?
And now it's time for an intermission.
Right?
You get your popcorn and you're,
man, what's happening?
Right? What's going to happen next?
Yeah. And so this again, that's how these words especially feel very prophetic, right? Because it closes out the last words before the end scene, kind of a thing.
Absolutely.
And what's going to happen here is, oh man, what's going on? What's going to be the case? He's going to the thing, and now the Jewishness has been revealed, and all of these things are moving, and it's been planted that the Jews are going to succeed in your mind as you're reading this. And again, remember sort of the purpose of the point of this story, as it's been recorded there, is it explains where this Feast of Purim came from, right? So I like to read this story and read this book, imagining, the setup is, we're sitting down at this feast we observe every year, and I'm a kid, right? I'm 6, I'm 8, I'm 10, I'm 12, whatever, somewhere in that. And I ask my parents, why do we celebrate this feast? And they go, let me tell you the story of Esther, right? And you can just see how it's playing out. And the kids are like, oh, wow, what's going to happen next, right? And so that's it's like,
well, you can imagine like hereditary puppet shows, along with the story, and the backlit shadow boxes or whatever, and so much to do. So what a great story and a great place to end for us this week. We never like to end an episode without conveying our desire to help anybody who needs it, whether it's by prayer or Bible questions and answers, commentary. We appreciate your comments so much. If you do find this content enjoyable and beneficial to you, we'd ask that you just give it a thumbs up wherever you find it, share it with people that you know, and of course we invite all of your comments, questions. So with that, we will let you go, and we will see you next week.
Bye.